Dabanamona, honourable members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of my chair, Mr. Murray Wu, board and members, I state at the outset that we look forward to engaging with you to grow our sector. Together, we need to create more than 1 million jobs. We need to attract more than 3 billion kina in capital investments in production facilities alone. Together, we need to drastically improve our capacity for efficient and sustainable production to ensure food and national security. And together, we need to improve the competitiveness of our domestic industries so that we can not only compete in the global arena, but thrive. These goals must not be viewed as ambitious aspirations. Let me be frank, we have fallen far behind. We have failed to successfully implement most of our plans at the top, such as any of our medium-term development plans, or plans at the bottom, such as our sectoral policies within our commodity boards and our agencies. Many of the plans and policy directives have been smart. They were specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and they were mostly time-bound. What they have not been is accountable. We have failed to implement them, and instead of implementing what we have agreed on, we often restart the process and come up with another plan. So what are we looking to achieve? Again, these are not aspirations. We need to create more than 1 million jobs. We need to attract more than 3 billion kina in capital investment in manufacturing. We need to increase our capacity for efficient and sustainable production if we are to ensure our food and national security. And yes, we need to increase our competitiveness. Leaders, this cannot be a long-term view. We need a sense of collective, focused urgency, and we must apply and maintain this sense of urgency throughout the 11th Parliament. In the next 5 years, it is possible for us to change our course and make significant, measurable inroads into increasing investment, employment, our tax base, and economy. If we take a holistic view of manufacturing, we are already quite diverse and robust. We have a relatively balanced mix of local, joint venture and foreign ownership in our sector. But I do note that manufacturing by its nature is capital intense. When coupled with the lack of a competitive and confident financial sector, new entrants, especially those of greater scale, have tended to have less local participation. Whilst we certainly have significant potential to be an exporter of value-added goods, we have a massively underserved domestic market. There is sufficient room within our domestic market alone to substantially grow our sector. So how can we drive growth in manufacturing? I've touched on the capital-intensive nature of manufacturing. The high cost of entry is a barrier. To be blunt, we need more competition in the banking sector. It was disappointing to see the ICCC block the sale of a bank that no longer wanted to operate in our market to a homegrown bank that very much wanted to expand. This transfer should have been approved. The state should now set a target of having no less than 3 new entrants in before 2027. We must prioritise the introduction of at least 2 international Tier 1 banks and 1 to 3 Tier 2 banks. Leaders, it is ridiculous to seek foreign direct investment but not allow our investors to repatriate any capital. We must address the sustained shortage of foreign currency. If, as our elected leaders, you continue to fail to address this problem, we may need to fall out of love with the pride of our own currency and adopt another. Whilst this is not within the realm of impossibility, we believe that with your leadership, we can address the issue. It is unfathomable as it is ridiculous that we can continually have trade surpluses, but a shortage of foreign currency. There are a couple of starting points here. Please stop making or giving any concessions on the repatriation of proceeds of sale. Proceeds of sales must be remitted back to PNG. Among those existing beneficiaries of the state exemptions, the state must forfeit this right. We, the taxpayers, are the owners of Kumul. Its earnings are our earnings. 100% of its earnings, especially from the sale of our domestic resources, needs to be repatriated. If the state won't do it, why would anybody else want to? Secondly, Manufacturing is energy intense and heavily reliant on transport infrastructure. All our neighbours understand the critical importance of reliable, cheap energy and transport infrastructure. They are making investments to ensure that businesses and households are able to leverage the benefits of reliable and affordable services. I have a saying that it is critical that those building trade-related infrastructures generate substantially less wealth for themselves than those that will use it. Unfortunately, in our case, those we are giving contracts to build and operate power stations, roads, wharves, airports, or subsea cables are making enviable profits, and the users are left paying high prices on generally substandard infrastructure. If I continue to be blunt, as I'm known, if you, the leadership, fails to address corrupt and weak practices in government procurement, all things shall fail, and we will not progress to a middle or upper income country, which of course is more than possible. The recent impacts of global inflation aside, successive governments have not done enough to reduce the cost of doing business. Yes, there have been some inroads and some positives, but we all know that we've not done enough. I touched on the need to create more than 1 million jobs. Did you know that every job in manufacturing generates at least 8 more jobs? If the government seeks to create a robust MSME sector, which we most definitely need, manufacturing is the linchpin. Manufacturers require more services than any other sector. We are the bedrock for middle-class growth. Within our sector, we have 3 employment streams: line workers, technical workers, and administration. Line workers, albeit requiring few skills or qualifications, need to be attentive and productive. They are the engine room of any manufacturer. Technical workers, on the other hand, need to be highly skilled with accredited qualifications. In addition to post-secondary education, they need thousands of hours of on-the-job experience. Technical colleges and universities need to be turning out quality graduates. TVET is almost completely dilapidated in PNG, with possibly the only notable exception being the work of our Governor Epitas and the APTC, which is funded by Australia. Employers have no feeding grounds to recruit from. Whilst each province should have several well-run technical colleges, we note that will take a long time. PNG needs to explore and leverage its bilateral relationships to ensure that we are training and providing at least 500 Papua New Guinean school leavers with an in-demand qualification before next July. In the following year, this number should triple, and by years 3 and beyond, we need to have the capacity for several thousand workers each year to obtain recognised trade qualifications. And please, I'm not talking about more mechanics for Ella Motors or fabricators for Exxon. Manufacturers need machinists, refrigeration mechanics, technical assessors and the like. In the past, we've sent 100 or so students to TAFE in North Queensland to obtain technical trade qualifications for motor mechanics and fabrication. This was successful, but it was costly. We need to open up our market to technical training organisations and seek to have our bilateral partners provide in-country training. At the same time as we will have qualified educators training our potential workers and our workforce, they can be training our potential teachers. Perhaps by the time we head into 2027, we will be transitioning into the second phase of fixing our TVET systems. The last category of workers is in the administration side. I'll keep this brief. Our schools are not turning out graduates that are ready to add value in the workplace. They lack comparable benchmarks in literacy, comprehension, reasoning, and furthermore are lacking a work ethic and timeliness. The news isn't much better when employers talk about the quality of our university graduates. Leaders, we can't continue to blame this mess on our outcome-based education experiment. Our teachers' colleges are turning out teachers who themselves are illiterate. How can an illiterate teacher teach to the level that is needed for us to reach our goals? We need innovative solutions. Maybe we need to work with our bilateral partners to attract their own university leavers, teachers, to come and work in our community schools. Just like with TVET, these educators will not only better teach our children, but our teachers might learn from them too. These are radical and unconventional thoughts, I know, but I was asked to not present any issues without a solution, and any possible solution needs to be one that is affordable, possible, and importantly, it must be able to make a difference within these 5 short years. Leaders, I'm mindful of your time and the time I am taking, so I'll touch on one last area. It's an enormous one, and I could go on for 2 days on its own, but that is regulation. The fact of the matter is that we either have good laws that we are failing to implement, or we have laws that are so awful that the state continually finds it in our national interest to grant exemptions from them. There are valid concerns with the manner in which the state has planned to roll out economic zones and corridors. We believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. If the only way to attract entrants is by offering discounts and creating self-contained zones that are adequately serviced, one surely has to ask, what do we expect to happen with all those that have invested, operated, and endured the tough conditions outside of these planned fences? We fully support the need to increase the level of transport and trade-related infrastructure, and to offer a fiscal and legal framework that is agreeable to investment. But we do not agree that it is to be restricted within the confines of a few new zones. We can build the zones, we need them, but we need to have a common regulatory environment. Our fiscal regime is by no means conducive to growth. We continue to allow few to carry the burden of many. We continue to lack the political leadership to drive change. In the 2022-23 budget, the state needs to address these imbalances. Salary and wages taxes need to fall, especially at the upper levels. Our highest marginal rate of tax should fall to 30% by 2027. Company profits tax should fall to 20% by 2027. And on the other side, we can remove some of these cumbersome processes for IRC, such as removing the deductions for dependents, and we can also seek to increase the GST to at least 15%. On this latter point, I do make one note. At 10%, many businesses are cheating the IRC. When we increase it, we will be incentivising more non-compliance. Penalties for evasion need to be increased, and compliance efforts need to shift from those that are paying taxes to the many we know are not. Manufacturers are also subject to very high levels of regulation from building, environmental, safety, customs, standards and conformance, quality assurance, sanitary and phytosanitary, and of course provincial licensing. The cost and time to obtain these licenses are significant. We need to pause and ask, what are we trying to achieve, and are we going the best way about this? The cost for obtaining licenses and certification must be based on the cost of administering any necessary systems. They should not in themselves be funding the operation of entire offices and agencies. After all, that's what taxes and budget appropriations are for. For instance, the cost levied by customs to lodge documentation should only be commensurate with the cost of maintaining Asakuta. Users should be paying a few toya per lodgement, not 30 or more kina. Further, what is the rationale for the Labor Department to charge several hundred kina to every business that has a generator? I think it's actually now surpassed more than 1,000 kina, and this certificate needs to be paid annually. We also need to ensure our regulatory reforms are mindful of the need and importance of utilising digital platforms. In the year 2022, it's ridiculous that finance, IRC, customs, labour, immigration, and even PNG Power are online. But Nakia is still paper-based. Leaders, I've come to the end of my allocated time. Within this term of government, if we are to create jobs, generate wealth, utilise downstream processing to unlock our agricultural potential, if we are to improve our food security and reduce our cost of living, we must agree on a new mechanism between the state and industry to quickly agree on these key focus areas, and we must jointly oversee their implementation. Thank you.